Children in at least 2 abandoned locations in town. Action News Jack's Russell Colburn is live in Highlands, and Russell, officers say that he told the kids he was a retired detective.
Yeah, but they say there's no evidence of that. And tonight we're joining you from one of those abandoned locations, the Lucky Strike bowling alley, which is now condemned. And just to give you an idea of how many witnesses there would be around here on a given day, you can see a motel right over there, and we've seen people up there against the railing most of the night. And if you swing with me over here, this is busy Dunn Avenue, and you can see just all the businesses right there off in the distance. The Jacksonville Sheriff's Office says 34-year-old James Abbey was harboring children who ran away from home. JSO says he didn't notify their parents or the police.
It's just sad that it just happened so close to home. I'm just in shock.
Peggy Alford lives near this vacant bowling alley on Harts Road near Dunn Avenue. JSO says it's one of the 2 locations where Abbey was doing this. They say the other was an abandoned high-rise on Clark Road about a mile away. The report is heavily redacted but lists 2 victims.
Why would he harbor 2 kids? That's just, it's not right.
That high-rise is dark and desolate, fenced in and protected with barbed wire. After learning what Abbey was allegedly doing, JSO says an officer saw Abbey, who's homeless, walking near it Monday and arrested him. They were told Abbey was known to have a gun and was telling kids he's a retired police detective, but there's no evidence of that.
It's hard to believe. It's very hard to believe.
Tonight, Abbey faces 2 misdemeanor charges related to aiding and sheltering minors. And you can see these signs outside the bowling alley telling people not to enter, unsafe structure, and the building is condemned. Now, coming up all new at 11, we're going to get into why these charges could actually be upgraded. Reporting live, Russell Colburn, Fox 30 Action News Jack.
Hello, everyone. You are live with King Sigma on this February 17th, 2020 President's Day. Hope everyone is doing well. And for those that have the day off, I hope that you take this time to, kick back and chill. It's cold out here. So it's definitely a nice day to, sit back and catch up on some things that I had to get organized, like my taxes and things like that today. So I thought I'd drop in for a moment to kind of catch up on some of these surviving bottom shelf Brad cases that I have backlogged right now. So what I'll try to do is over the next 2 weeks, probably do like 3 or 4 of these if I have the time. I can't guarantee it, but as I move forward with these cases, I think by now, more and more people, just from the emails that I'm receiving, they're starting to say, hey, it's a good thing that you give your take on these stories that the news doesn't do a good job of spreading throughout media. They may do like local reports and then they do like surface level. I'm noticing that with the mainstream media, they purposely don't do a good job of giving in-depth analysis of these kind of stories. So they'll give like a quick snippet report, but they don't give you enough details to connect the dots on how like harboring youth is connected to something like foster home children being aged out or the breakdown of the American family, specifically the Black family. They try to ignore that part of the puzzle. So that's the part of the puzzle that I hope that I'm doing a good job of connecting through this series, is showing how racial discrimination against Black men, this deification of the American white male leads to very bad outcomes, really for Black children more than anything. But of course, for a lot of the Black women too. But the Black children definitely are becoming more and more victims of this kind of deification of white people. I mean, in the story that you just heard about the accused, James Phillip Abbey, he's another one of these guys that's kind of like a poster child for surviving bottom shelf Brad. You got a homeless white man who's pushing middle age, walking around armed, harboring children. And last time I checked, they're looking to upgrade the charges. So again, this is America. So being accused of something doesn't mean that you're guilty of it. So he has his right to his day in court, but the prosecution is looking to upgrade his charges to something more serious. So we'll see what happens with that. But it's interesting because David Carroll, he has this quote that he uses where he says, his white skin, Waldo's white skin covers a multitude of sins. And I use the term genetic diplomatic immunity. And it is quite fascinating how these individuals seem to be able to do things that even educated black men are not able to do. You know what I'm saying? Here's a homeless guy walking around with guns, but people in the community knew about him. That's what kind of threw me off. Solomon Giles, they didn't say the name of the children, just said under 18. There's certain rules in different states about giving too much details about child victims, so you have to be aware of that. So they just said under 18. But you do have to understand that in certain states, they have certain rules about disclosing juveniles information, pictures and things like that. So they didn't disclose that. It just said under 18 juveniles. But he was known in the community for harboring children. So I'm sitting there thinking like, you got a homeless white man walking around armed, telling people that he's a retired detective, yet he's homeless, living in these abandoned buildings, and adults in the community knew that he's known for picking up runaways and living in these buildings with him doing who knows what. It's just kind of amazing to me what a white man can get away with in America on all levels, from the lowest bottom shelf Brad to the highest Chad. They can get away with anything, man. So the charges that they booked him on December 16th were sheltering unmarried minors for more than 24 hours without notifying a parent or parental consent. So he got 2 charges of that. And in Florida, the number for that statute, for anyone that might be interested in the actual statute itself, it's statute 985.731. And I'll just read the statute to you because he got 2 charges so far, but they're gonna possibly add more charges over the next month or two. It says that sheltering unmarried minors, aiding unmarried minor runaways, and a person who is not an authorized agent of the department or the Department of Children and Families may not knowingly shelter an unmarried minor for more than 24 hours without the consent of the minor's parent or guardian, or without notifying a law enforcement officer of the minor's name and the facts that the minor is being provided shelter. A person may not knowingly provide aid to an unmarried minor who has run away from home without first contacting the minor's parent or guardian or notifying a law enforcement officer. The aid prohibited under this paragraph includes assisting the minor in obtaining shelter, such as hotel lodgings. A person who violates this section commits a misdemeanor of the first degree, punishable by the laws of the state of Florida. So right now he has 2 misdemeanors under the statute 985.731, but it looks like it's going to be more because, again, you know, once you get one of those children in there, and then again, there was other children, he was known. So they're going to reach out to other children and they'll get some more charges against them most likely. And, you know, when you get the children in that room and they start talking, they're going to tell other things that might have went down. And the reason why this story was very important to me is because of the way that in Jacksonville, that's a very black city, actually. For those that don't know, Jacksonville, Florida is actually 30% black, with a rising population of people coming from the north to escape the high cost of living, moving down to places like Jacksonville. So that 30% number is going to go up. So you have this bottom shelf Brad homeless guy walking around, enticing young children, collecting children. And you saw the woman that was being interviewed. That was a black woman being interviewed. And all these people in these communities can never say is that it was wrong, but you all knew that he was doing this. You know what I'm saying? He's been doing this. They were saying that in the community, he's known for having these kids living with him in these abandoned buildings. But again, there's a reason why no one says anything, because these are children that come from foster care. These are children that have been neglected by their own families. And again, you know, a lot of these children come from single mother homes. Most of them do. So yeah, that was something that really stood out to me, the fact that Jacksonville has a population of 30%. So that's a very black city. And, you know, you also have a high concentration within the city limits. So the fact that none of these adults were reporting this guy, just again, it shows that how easy it is for these Jason Roger Pope type individuals, your Joe Morrisseys, and guys like James Abbey to be accused of doing these certain kind of crimes and convicted of doing certain kind of crimes because they get a pass. And that pass is real. Again, as David Carroll has said numerous times, his white skin covers a multitude of sins, and it's true. So when you look at the data related to a lot of these children that are having these unfortunate outcomes and finding themselves, you know, in an abandoned building with a James Phillip Abbey, as he's accused of, these black children go missing at a higher rate than white kids. This is a fact, okay? And what was interesting as well was to look at the actual National Crime Information Center's data on runaways and missing children. And what you notice with these runaways, homeless children, and missing children is that about nearly 40% of all homeless youths are black children, and the majority are black males. And, you know, that's serious because black people only make up about 12% of the population. And if you start like subtracting biracials from that number, you start subtracting non-native black Americans, I'm actually thinking our numbers are more closer to like 8% or 9%. When you really think about our numbers, if you were to subtract all of the diasporan blacks in America that are included in our black number of 12%, and then you were to subtract biracials, which is going to happen this decade, because you're hearing more and more biracials say that they're not black or white. They want to be identified on the next census as biracial. So you got to wonder, with the 21 million abortions since 1973 by Native Black American women, and the actual immigration numbers since 1980, and the increase of biracials, is the Black American population number really truly 12%? Or is it more something like 8 or 9%? That's something to think about. And we're going to have to deal with that over this next decade as Black America continues to splinter and disintegrate. But yeah, you know, so you're looking at these stats, you're like, wow, 40% of homeless youth are Black, even though Blacks are this small percentage of the population. This is one of the reasons why I keep telling you that we're really on our own this decade, and we're gonna have to solve our problems on our own from a cultural level, as individual people and as individual households coming together with other households of like mind. The government is not gonna solve these problems. I don't care which party you point to. The Democrats definitely aren't gonna solve the problem because they cannot speak to the real issue of the structure of the Black family and the breakdown of the Black family since 1965. That's the source of so many of these problems. Bad child rearing, child neglect, neglected children, abandoned children become ministers to society when they grow up, on average. We know the data. So in some of these cities with the largest Black population, they were saying like, so they were looking at cities like LA, Chicago, New York. Because remember that 40% number is an aggregation of all the Black homeless youth in America. That's why the averages don't tell the true story. But when they actually isolated the 6 largest cities and their Black population, do you realize that in some of these cities with the larger Black populations that they had 80% of all homeless youth were Black? So don't let that 40% number from the FBI fool you, because that takes into consideration like Blacks living in Utah or the whitest places as well. But when you actually looked at the 6 largest cities like New York, Chicago, Houston, those type of cities, it was up. Some of those cities had 8 out of 10 of their homeless were Black youth, mostly Black boys under the age of 18. And then you wonder why they don't want us to have these kind of conversations, because you got to go to the source. What's creating all of these disadvantaged children, all of these abandoned children, all these abused children? It's the breakdown of the Black family. It's the current structure of the Black family. And it's currently a culture that's a second industrial age culture that's not even really fit for the third industrial age as we move into a fourth industrial age. That's the problem. So you got the family structure, you got the cultural problem, and then you got the overall, obviously, racial issues as well, and racism against Blacks too. So when you put all those factors together and you ask yourself, which one of these factors can I control the most? You can control the culture that you embrace. You can control the kind of structure of a family that you want. Those are the 2 things you control. The general racism that you're going to endure as Black people, you don't have a whole lot of control over that to a certain extent. But you can definitely control the kind of culture that you're going to embrace and how you're going to move out here to become self-actualized, to actually contribute something positive to society overall, which indirectly will benefit the Black population as well. But no, we're not supposed to talk about this. We're not supposed to talk about the abandoned Black children that are left to be living in an abandoned building with James Abbey and many, many other Waldos. Because again, each one of these stories, understand that you're just getting a snippet of how big the problem actually is. You see what I'm saying? So these are just the guys that get caught. You got to wonder, I mean, with each one of these stories and each one of these entries in this Surviving Bottom Shelf Brad series, how reflective is it of the numbers that are out that are never going to be caught? And that's something that I want you guys to really think about. So something else that stood out to me was that there was this pipeline to prison argument that's been made over the last 2 decades. And you start looking at things like foster care. So I was looking at foster care. I was looking at the numbers for like orphanages, and Black children are so overrepresented in orphanages, foster care system. They're way overrepresented. Like they were 2 times more likely than white children to be put in foster care. You know, even though you would think, well, okay, white people, they make up like 75% of the population in America. They should have like 7 times the rate of children in these homeless facilities, these detention centers, foster care centers. They should be the ones that are overrepresented, but no, it's actually Black children. So we know that no one cares about the Black male, but I actually think the biggest victim in 2020 America is the Black boy. There's lots of resources that go to women in general in America. 99% of all domestic violence facilities are for women. I think they had like 1 or 2 male domestic violence facilities in the entire country of the United States, even though the rate of female against male domestic violence is huge, and the domestic violence against women against Black boys is even bigger. So there has been no investment in black male concerns. And the more I dig into like the history of like the Black feminism movement, it makes a lot of sense to me, because a lot of what's been dictated to the politicians through the Democrats has come from Black lesbian feminists. And that's a fact. I didn't even know this, but as I dig more into the history, I came to find out that a lot of what we call policy for Black Americans was actually white so-called liberals listening to arguments made by Black feminists who often are lesbians. Go read about Barbara Smith and some of these women like her who are baby boomers or silents that played a key role in writing like the kind of policies and dictating the conversation up into the last 10 years. If you look at the years 1965 to about 2000, you'd be shocked at how many Black feminist lesbians were actually dictating policy to white politicians over the last 50 years. They've actually been writing the rules for you. And I've been reading about this because I was unaware of the role that the Black lesbian has played in a lot of this policy that's been made. So instead of like being even-handed about it, they've put all these resources into Black female issues that they determine. Now, remember, I don't mean the general rank and file Black woman. They don't give a shit about her. What they've done, they put resources into the things that concern them as Black feminists and Black lesbians. So just keep that in mind. That's why they've seen a lot of gains over the last 30 years. But when you ask yourself, how is the rank and file Black woman gained from these laws that have been written at the behest of Black feminist policy and philosophy? I don't see any gains for them, but those feminists have gotten themselves in positions of powers. They've made a place for themselves in corporate America. They've secured all kind of government grants for their nonprofit organizations that solve no problems. They've gotten the benefits. So go read up on some of these Black feminists from the 70s and the 80s who are now in their late 60s to 80 years old. That group is one of the most interesting groups to actually study, man. These Black women who were in their 20s in like the 70s. You need to read up on these women and who they became after those movements were over. These women didn't just disappear and die off in their 30s. They actually used the momentum of affirmative action. They used the momentum of the sexual revolution and civil rights to create these nonprofit organizations to secure income for themselves and to continue pushing a very destructive message for the rest of Black working class and rank and file America. Again, it's benefited the top 10% of them, but what has it done for the overall Black American family structure in America? Okay. So another thing that it was interesting pointing out is how the child protection agencies work in protecting these children from these accused pedophiles and convicted pedophiles. So you got a situation like James Abbey, who's known in that community for harboring these children. Where was child protection? Then you come to find out that, you know, Black parents are more likely to have their children removed than white parents following child protection investigations. Okay, now it gets even interesting. So I noticed that whenever they do these statistics, they always just, they don't never say the structure of the family. You actually have to dig. Then you find out that when they make that statement, they're actually talking about single mother households. But you'll notice that in a lot of the they don't like to use that term single mother household or female-led household. They try to like, so you got 28% of Black people that are married or something like that. They never say like the difference between the married people and their children's outcomes versus the single mother household. So you have to dig deeper into the data to find out that that's who they're referring to. So if your child is being raised in a female-led household, they're more likely to be taken away in the CPS investigation as well than a white child. So homelessness definitely plays a big role in youth becoming prostitutes and getting into juvenile criminality. And in some states, they've changed the laws where even juveniles can be convicted of adult crimes. So you see that there's this obvious, like, logical chain reaction, right? Of these single mother-led households, children becoming homeless, children being kicked out of foster care when they age out, and then becoming vulnerable victims at 16, 17 years old or whatever. And they're supposed to be treated like adults that have not gotten the kind of nurturing They haven't gotten the kind of cultural programming that's needed to compete and know how to look out for their own best interest and safety. Some of these kids are very vulnerable. So that's why you got Waldo. He's a homeless Waldo walking around with all these children in this abandoned building that he's accused of. And the people are just like, oh, well, he used to be a cop, with no proof that he was a cop. The news told you that it was a complete lie. This guy was homeless, but yet he has access to all these children in that Jacksonville area. I don't get it, man. And then you got people on here, they talk about different things, but I don't hear them talking about the number of Black runaway children. I don't hear them talking about the abandoned Black child. I don't hear them talking about these victims of these white pedophiles, which is actually the profile. The FBI profile of a pedophile is a middle-aged white man. You see what I'm saying? But they're not talking about that. They're talking about all these tertiary, secondary issues, but they never want to talk about the primary issue. Yet it's Black men like myself, who would call myself a political independent, I'm talking about it. So why aren't the 85% that said that they care so much about the outcomes for Black America talking about these things? Why aren't they talking about James Abbey and his accused harboring of runaway Black children and white children and Hispanic children in a city that has 30% Black population? I would think that this kind of thing would get out through a whole Black social media. Isn't that what a community is supposed to be about? Where is the protection element of the community? Isn't part of being a quote unquote community notifying people of sexual deviants and pedophiles that are accused of doing different crimes against the children of the community? Wouldn't you think with 85% of the Black community saying that that's what they're about, that these things would be notified to the whole social Black Twitter, Black YouTube, Black Facebook? Nah. Instead, all they want to do is sit around fighting each other all day. So I'm asking a question I already know the answer to. Now, when you look at the FBI National Crime Information Center's data on these missing Black children, you know, 40% of the children that go missing every year are Black out of 424,000 children. Can you believe that? In the United States, 424,000 children go missing every year. 40% of those children are Black children. That means that 157,000 Black children go missing every year. Some of you live in cities that have a population of about 157,000. You see what I'm saying? Some of you live in cities that have a population of about 157,000. And that's how many Black children go missing in America every year. And most of them are Black males, as quiet as it's kept. They talk about bring back our girls, our missing girls, but the truth is the majority of homeless youth, runaway youth, and missing youth are actually Black boys. But the only ones that are going to talk about that are people like myself. Very few Black people are going to talk about that, and the white society ain't going to touch it. Because guess what? The same white society that you're running to solve your problems, guess what? The profile of a pedophile in America is a white middle-aged man. That's, you know, and then you have these situations where these guys that are politicians and corporate leaders and professors get caught up in like child pornography, child sex trafficking cases every day. So the same person that you're running to solve your problem, there's a high chance that they could be a pedophile or they could be a child pornographer. You ever thought about that? How do you run to the people that are causing so many of your problems that you say, instead of solving your own problems? That's where we're at now. You're going to have to solve your own problems. You cannot depend on the state to do it. You cannot depend on corporate America to do it. You're going to have to figure this out for yourself going forward. I'm telling you that right now. And if you don't think that you have the guts, the intelligence, and the strength to do it, do the rest of society a favor and please stop having children. Can you just do that? Can you become the most outspoken advocates for birth control and family planning? Can you just do that? Can you get that part of it right? Because it's getting harder and harder to raise families now, man. The cost of living is going up and up and up, especially in urban America. Every year it gets harder just to be a person that's one person out here and keep your head above water and to live a entry-level middle-class lifestyle, which is $40,000 for one individual now. If you're not making it over 40,000, you're not even middle class in America anymore. And that goes up by 3% every year. And in some cities, even more than that, depending on how heavy the demand is for housing and how the competition for jobs near different kind of residency. So don't let that number fool you either, because again, that's an average. Some cities are experiencing way more inflation than that. So that's all I say. If you guys are not prepared to raise children and you can't protect them, if you don't have that $13,000 a year to take care of them, I think you all should just opt out of having children going forward. Because the biggest victims of all of your bad behavior are the black children, especially the black boys. Yeah, you don't want to hear that. You'd rather sit around arguing about what this black man is doing sexually or not sexually, what country he's going to, what country he's not going to, you know, what neighborhood he chose to live in, when he ain't your problem. You're the problem, because you're not raising these black children. So when you start talking about the condition of the children, that's when they get really spooked, because now they got to look at themselves, because they're like, well, who's raising these children? Who are the parents? You'll get crickets when you start asking who are the parents and who are raising these children. That's like taboo now. So you know how interracial dating was something that was taboo maybe 30, 40 years ago. That's been replaced with speaking against the black family openly. That's the new taboo that the Democrats can't touch. That's why, you know, people were asking, why haven't y'all talked about the black voter, and the black voter compromises the base of your party? They can't answer the question. Even the Democratic candidates cannot answer why they won't talk about it, but I can. They won't talk about it because the supermajority of problems facing the black American majority relate to the breakdown of the black family. And they've known this, and they can't deal with it. So what they've done, the Republicans were the party of benign neglect from the 70s through the 90s for the most part. Their whole thing was like, we're going to do a benign neglect policy. Guess what? It's flipped. The Republicans have embraced the fact that they don't do the identity politics thing. So they're kind of like exempted because everyone knows it. The Democrats have now become the party of benign neglect, which is very sad, because blacks have given away their voting block at a rate of 90% plus for 40, 50 years. And now the black man is getting nothing, period. But even the black female is starting not to get anything over the last 10 years, because so many of what she thought was for her are actually going to Latinos. The Democrats want to bring in the Latinos. That's their main goal over the next decade, is to capture the Latino vote. So that's their focus on non-white voting. They're not going to get the Asian vote because Asians lean more toward the Republicans. Latino men lean towards the Republicans. So they're really trying to capture the Latino female. That's really who they're going after right now, that Latino female. So that's who they want their base to be. That's why they won't talk about these issues. So the Democrats came out with another bill recently, and I just thought it was interesting that they've become the party of family destruction. They've become the party of protecting those like the James Abbeys, those like the Joe Morrisseys, those like the Jason Roger Popes. So coming from California as usual, they have a bill that's going to try to protect sexual offenders. So I just wanted to share this bill with the audience that the Democrats came up with. Just this was they've been pushing this for the last year in California. So try to bring up the screen for you all so I can share it with you. So hopefully everyone can see the screen, but this is your California Democratic Party, who is really, when you look at the current situation going on in the Democratic race for the presidential nomination, the left-leaning Democrat, the most leftist Democrats have kind of taken control of the party narrative. And one of the things that they push more than anything is alternative sexual lifestyles. That's the main thing that they're pushing more than anything else. So when they say identity politics, they don't even mean what you think they mean, which goes to show how people misuse words all the time. When you look at the creator of the term identity politics, it was created by a black lesbian feminist by the name of Barbara Smith. She coined the phrase identity politics. When she was asked what does identity politics mean, she said it definitely doesn't mean what the media has been telling you it means. She said that identity politics meant that black women have a separate agenda separate from everyone else, including the black male and including the black child, and they have needs and concerns that are separate from everyone else. That's what the root of identity politics came. It was a black female that actually came up with the term identity politics. And it had nothing to do with all this alternative lifestyle stuff. It had nothing to do with like Latino, black men. It was strictly about black female agenda led by black feminists. That's what she said, and she created the term. So the media has tried to sell this idea that identity politics is like all-inclusive umbrella for these groups. No, it's not. That was never the intention. It's not being used like that. It doesn't include black men in identity politics, period. So California Democrats author bill to protect sex offenders who lure minors. Now just think about that. You know, under this bill, the accused James Phillip Abbey, he would get all these protections. So the guy that's being accused of harboring youths in Jacksonville, if this law was to spread in America to the other states under a party led by these individuals, they would actually protect these sex offenders who are harboring children, luring minors that currently have to be registered in the sexual registry. So it says, no sex offender registry if perpetrated within 10 years of age of the minor. Wow. Just think about that for a minute. This is coming out of California this year. They want to pass a law that so if a guy that's 28 years old or something like, if he's 25 years old and he's living in an abandoned building with a 15-year-old runaway, he will be protected from being a sexual offender. If he's 20 and the kid is 10. So State Senator Scott Weiner of San Francisco, of course, there are some real Looney Tunes in San Francisco, man. I mean, these people really have no sense of reality. They don't care about what the family structure. They don't care about the children. They want your children. That's what this has proven to me. These individuals that come up with these kind of bills like this want your children. They want you to waive your rights to protect your children. They want to take away all your guardian protections from your children. That's their next step, is just to say, you don't have a child. Children are public assets. That's their next step, is to take away your private citizenship rights, take away your private guardianship rights, and just say that children are the public property. That's what they're leaning towards. So this guy, State Senator Scott Weiner and Assemblywoman Suzanne Eggman, introduced recent legislation to end what now they're calling it blatant discrimination. They say to end blatant discrimination against LGBT young people regarding California's sex offender registry. They're saying that it's a form of discrimination to outlaw pedophilia. People, this is your Democratic Party of 2020 saying this. However, under their bill, 145, SB 145, the offenders would not have to automatically register as sex offenders if the offenders are within 10 years age of the minor. So if there's a 13-year-old child in this law with a 23-year-old sex offender, male or female, they don't have to register no more. So they're saying that that's a form of discrimination against pedophilia. So the next obvious step is to add pedophilia to the LGBT. So it'll be LGBT in another 3 or 4 years if they get what they want. Weiner claims the current law disproportionately targets LGBT young people for mandatory sex offender registration, since LGBT people usually cannot engage in vaginal intercourse. These are some sick individuals, man. Sick. Existing law, the Sex Offender Registration Act, amended by Proposition 35 by voters in 2012, ban on human trafficking and sex slavery, requires a person convicted of a certain sex crime to register with law enforcement as a sex offender while residing in California or while attending school or working in California. Now, this legislature, this state senator in California, Scott Weiner, and we know how politics works. A lot of these guys that make it to the state senatorial level, they have aspirations to take it to the federal level. So just remember that name out in California, because don't say I didn't tell you what kind of ideas he has and what kind of bills he's trying to push. Because you'll hear about this guy, Scott Weiner, running for governor of California. You'll hear about him running for the House of Representatives, the U.S. Congress, in 5 years. Mark my words, because there's a trajectory that legislators take to become Congress members, to become senators, to become governors and things of that nature, to join in executive administrations like HUD and things like that. So this is where he's at now at the state senator level. Where will he be 5 years from now, 10 years from now? This will be your candidate for president in 10 years. Okay? So he says, currently, for consensual yet illegal sexual relations between a teenager aged 15 and over and a partner with 10 years of age, sexual intercourse, vaginal intercourse, does not require the offender to go onto the sex offender registry. Rather, the judge decides based on the facts of the case whether sex offender registration is warranted or unwarranted. By contrast, for other forms of intercourse, specifically oral and anal intercourse, sex offender registration is mandated under all situations with no judicial discretion. So, I mean, let me just go to the part where he says, so legislators Weiner and Eggman say they are trying to shield LGBT young people from having to automatically register as sex offenders for specified sex crimes. But their bill does much more. It would allow, so under their bill, it would allow a sex offender who lures a minor with the intent to commit a felony the ability to escape registering as a sex offender as long as the offender is within 10 years of age of the minor. No specification is made as to whether the sexual offender is straight or gay, or lesbian, or transsexual. SB 145 would add a section to the state's penal code stipulating that as long as the offender is not more than 10 years older than the minor, they are not automatically mandated to register as a sex offender. So I'm gonna stop there. For anyone that wants to read the full article, it's an interesting read. You can find it at the California Globe. I'll put the link in the chat for you. But yeah, this is the future of the Democratic Party. And when you tell people this, it makes a lot of people uncomfortable because they've been castrated by the communists. And that's what it is. When you say leftists, you're talking about communists. Because if you understand the root of communism, hey, shout out to the brother Gone Postal. Appreciate you, says another informative broadcast. You know, I appreciate it, man. If people come to my small channel and they feel that they walk away with any kind of positive, constructive information, I feel that that's a victory. So yeah, so I put the link in the chat. Just do my little closing thoughts and say that we have to be aware of the people that are coming up in the ranks. A lot of you brothers love sports, so you understand how AAU basketball works, how it works to help brothers get into like D1 colleges, and how the D1 colleges is all like a connected pipeline and farm system for the corporate MBA. The same thing is for politics. They groom and they develop young legislatures that will eventually become the statesmen running the federal government 5-10 years in the future. So, you know, that woman right there, Susan Eggman, she's an assemblywoman out there in California, and the other guy, Weiner, they're being groomed to run California and lead California. And then when people like myself tell you these things without showing you these receipts, y'all think that we're just like on some conspiracy stuff. But no, this ain't no conspiracy. This is policy. This is the Democratic Party's policy. This is where they're about to go this decade. I'm sorry to tell you all. Your kids 10 to 20 years from now will not be something that you privately have a right to control if these people are made U.S. senators, if these people are allowed to sit on the Supreme Court, if these people are allowed to be elected to the federal courts. So we're, you know, as Black American men, we're really the ones that are in the hardest of hardest places because we really don't have a political party. You know what I'm saying? We really are just out here on our own. And we're going to have to develop our own agenda of what we're not going to support and what we do want to support. So I think that's more important, is that the Black thinking man develop his own agenda for what he supports and what he doesn't support. And then that agenda becomes ossified and strong enough that enough Black men say, you know, I agree with that platform, that and those agendas. Who's the closest to giving us the most that we want and most against what we're against? That's for each individual Black man at this point to determine, because I'm not even clear yet. You know, I read a lot of I read all the Democrat stuff. I read all the Republican stuff. I read the Libertarian Party. I read it all. And I'm not 100% sure yet, because I reached out to a known libertarian professor and I asked him a direct question. This, you guys that understand libertarian, you're going to like this one. So I reached out to a guy named David Boaz. Any of you that understand libertarianism know about David Boaz, Reason, and some of these think tanks that these white men run that claim that they're libertarian. some of these libertarians, the more pure ones, they are for open borders. So I asked David Boaz, I said, Professor Boaz, you're for open borders as a dyed-in-the-wool libertarian, but at the same time, Republicans are against it, and they have presented counter data to your data showing that the biggest the person that suffers most because of open borders is the Black working class male. And there's a direct correlation. And this is what the Republicans have actually put out and proven through like Heritage Organization and things like that. They've proven that there's a strong correlation between open borders growth and working class Black men being taken out of working class jobs and unskilled jobs. So they suffer the most, the working class Black male. And that also means the working class Black family. He had no response to it. He had no response. This is supposed to be the expert on libertarianism. He hadn't thought about that a Black man would step to him, a regular common Black man. I ain't no one special. I am your regular common day, everyday Black man. And I asked him, I said, how do you explain from a libertarian perspective what Black men that are the most harmed by open borders policies are to do from a libertarian perspective? He didn't have no response because he had never even thought of it as a white male. So that's what I'm saying when I say I don't have a political party or a political philosophy that I embrace 100%, because I've noticed that a lot of these people that created these philosophies are white men. So they're seeing things from a white male perspective. And anything that you embrace as a Black man, you'd be surprised when you take your spin as a Black male, they don't really have an answer for it because there hasn't been enough literature put out there by Black men. So you have a few guys out there like the Thomas Sowells, you have the Walter Williams types, but it's not like a big, robust army of Black academics that are putting out that kind of Black libertarian literature. Because a lot of them, again, like I talked about in the last upload, is that a lot of Black men have been run out of academia. So we have to create our own little think tanks and have our own conversations, polish our talking points, and come up with our own agenda. So that's just something that I wanted to leave you guys with. So as you know, listen to this week's Democratic debate. It's going to be in Nevada. And you'll see that you're not going to be talked about. The Black man is never talked about in these conversations. And even now, they're not even talking about the Black female anymore. And now that they're going to Nevada, and which has such a high growing populations of Latinos out there, I'm hearing more and more that like the Latinos are taking over Nevada, and they're getting a lot of influx of these communist minded Californians that are being priced out of the state that they created with their communist policy that's pricing them out. So make that make sense. So yeah, I mean, you know, for anyone that's interested in any kind of thing, politics this week, do yourself a favor and go listen to the debate just to see how they don't talk about you, so you can confirm what I'm saying is true as you move forward this year. But when you want to look at the future of the Democratic Party, that bill SB 145 represents the future. They come up with all these laws to protect the alternative lifestyle, even if it's criminal. They come up with all these laws and all these cash payments to illegal immigrants. But when it comes to you as a Black man or a Black woman, moreover than it should, because Black women have been the most, dedicated to the Democrats. They're even telling these Black women now, like, y'all time is up too. Yeah, you giving us 95% of your vote, but your vote can only be useful if you can bring in 90% of the Black men. You see what I'm saying? See, they realize that now, the Democratic Party, and they're actually low key telling the Black females that, hey, your vote was only useful to us to the extent that you can guarantee that Black male vote. And you can't do that anymore because we research these guys. We're sending our academic spies to listen to these guys, and they're telling us straight out that they're not going to vote for us unless they get a check in the mail. So they're very aware of that. So they have to look for another constituency. I mean, obviously they think they're going to get white people, but that doesn't even make any sense. So the main constituency that they will go after will be Latinos. Because remember, just about 75% of white men voted for Donald Trump in 2016. And that number is going to go up. He's going to probably get 85% of the white male vote, or close to 80. I'd be shocked if he didn't get 80% of the white male vote. 55% of white women voted for him. And the economy's been roaring along for them. So that number will at least stay the same. It might even go up slightly. Maybe that 55% goes up to 60%. So you ask yourself, where are they going to get these votes from? They're trying to groom that Latino vote. I don't think that's going to work out for them either. But guess what? Whether it does or not, it's not going to benefit you. So according to the law out there in California, the actual direct beneficiary of these kind of laws that the leftist communist wants to push out there in California would be someone like the accused James Phillip Abbey. And we'll see if he's convicted of those charges and if the prosecution brings higher charges. But as of now, he's innocent until proven guilty. But his case does present to me an example of how vulnerable these Black children are out here, because they're being raised by the most incompetent generation of Black parents since slavery. So with that said, I appreciate you all coming through. Everyone have a good President's Day, and I hope that your week is profitable and productive and positive. And with that, I'm out.